Welcome back to Omega Strikers Nation. For this video, I'm going to talk about everything you need to know about controls for Omega Strikers, primarily comparing WASD versus MOBA controls. For those coming here who are not really sure what those mean, WASD just means you move with the W, A, S, and D buttons and cast your moves with your other hotkeys, similar to shooting games like Fortnite and Valorant, whereas MOBA controls mean that you move by right-clicking and cast your moves with Q, W, E, R, similar to how you'd play League of Legends. Tons of you are going to be coming from other MOBA games like League or Dota, so you might think that playing with MOBA settings is the correct choice. But for those of you who are on the fence about deciding which one to choose, or even the MOBA veterans who are looking for advice, I'm here to help you make the switch to WASD. In fact, I'm going to recommend WASD controls to 99.9% of players, and you'll find out why in just a bit. With that being said, let's start off with the main topic on the differences between the two settings. Let's start off with shooting. One of the most important things to do in Omega Strikers is having the ability to hit the core the opposite direction you are moving from. For example, moving backwards while shooting forwards. When you're using MOBA controls, unless you're a mechanical god, it is very difficult to run left and shoot right, which can potentially cause you to even shoot into your own net by accident. With WASD controls and using your mouse facing the right way, hitting the core into the opposite direction is very easy. You can have your cursor sitting exactly where you want to shoot it the entire time while running in any direction. This fact alone was enough to make me and all of my friends switch over to WASD controls, even though we started out as MOBA players. If this reason for switching from MOBA controls to WASD has convinced you already, why not try hitting the like button as well? Next we have key bindings. QWER felt very comfortable for me as I've been playing League of Legends for almost over 10 years now, and honestly, it really is comfortable. It's very simple to use your abilities and click around, but if you let yourself get used to playing MOBA controls and then switch over to WASD, it's going to be frustrating. For example, I went all the way from high gold to low silver in just one day of playing after I switched from MOBA to WASD. WASD also has a couple of weird controls because the first thing you're thinking about is where do you put the rest of your buttons? There are 4 abilities in the game after all. The default setting is having your basic kick set to your left click and your primary attack on your right click. This leaves you with your secondary and special kind of lost in the wind right now. My recommendation is just try a bunch of different combinations and see which ones work for you the most. Right now I'm using a mouse button for my special ability and using spacebar for my secondary ability. However, I know people who use Control, Left Shift, R, and other buttons to hold these abilities. I even know some players who put all their abilities on different mouse buttons because they have a special gaming mouse that allows them to do so. Again, I would suggest playing around with what feels most comfortable to you, but across the board, pros are using left click as a basic strike, right click as a primary, spacebar as secondary, and R as your special. So if that's good enough for the pros, why not us too? As for MOBA controls, there are a few benefits for using this control scheme over WASD. Movement is a ton smoother. With WASD, you really only have 8 directions you could go. You could go up, top right, right, bottom right, down, bottom left, left, and top left. Compare this to MOBA controls where you can literally go anywhere you want or any direction you want very simply. The advantage of MOBA controls is that I predict in around like 5 years, I feel like every single pro player is going to be using MOBA controls if the game is still around at that point. I hope you guys can already see the reason why. Essentially, being able to move in more than 8 directions is probably going to be crucial in top tier pro play after everyone gets a lot better. Unfortunately, not everyone has the God-given mechanics that Faker himself has. Faker, what was that? So for me, with no plans of going pro in this game, I'm going to be sticking to my WASD. In Tetris, a lot of people, when they moved a piece left to right, they just held down the left and right buttons. They were too afraid to do a technique called hypertapping. Hypertapping involves hitting the D-pad with lots of quick presses resulting in faster movement. This is very effective, but in a game like Tetris where you can make 0 mistakes throughout the entire run, this is a highly risky strategy. Tetris came out in 1984, but it took until the 2018 World Championship where a 7-time champion lost to a 16-year-old underdog who used the hypertapping technique. Now, everyone uses hypertapping, and I heard there's even a new technique that's even better than that in Tetris. This is why I think MOBA could take over WASD. It just depends on how long the game lasts and how long the skill gap takes to develop. So even if all the current pros are doing WASD right now, it could change in the future. I actually think that going into the future, a lot of controller players will actually have the best of both worlds because they can go in any direction in a circle because of the two analog sticks on controllers. They could use one for moving around and one for striking. In fact, right now, one of the best goalies, who I believe is rank 1 or rank 2 right now, exclusively uses a controller even though controllers are not fully supported yet in the game. Remember guys, the game is in beta, so they're going to be making a ton of improvements as time goes on. Next, I want to talk about the other settings within the control section. First is cursor size. The three options are small, medium, and large. I'm sticking with medium right now, however, I've seen people use all sorts of different sizes. Here are the pros and cons of each. With the small cursor size, you're able to see more of your screen, but sometimes I find it difficult to use because I lose track of my cursor. Large is on the opposite end of the spectrum. If you constantly lose track of your cursor, large is a very good option to have because it'll be really big on your screen like this. Whereas even with the small controls in the settings menu, I'm already losing track of it right now. Again, I like using the happy medium of medium cursor size because I feel like it brings a balance between the two. Next, I want to go over a key binding that I feel like a lot of beginner players are not using, which is the scoreboard. Scoreboard is really useful to check, and it defaults to tab because it shows you what type of trainings the enemies and your teammates are using. This can be especially important when someone is using a training such as stacks on stacks because you could keep track of how many stacks they have. If you see an opponent with 100, you might want to try to knock them out. On the other hand, if you see someone with well fed, you might want to prevent them from taking orbs and be an orb hog yourself. Next, for settings, I want to talk about strike indicator, ability indicators, and retrying your ability if stunned. From what I've seen, the pros are using strike indicator to off, ability indicators they use both on and off, and retry ability if stunned, I see them use off more often. The reason behind this is casting faster and offering more control. The better and better you get at the game, the more important this is because this game is almost all about timing. However, ability indicators is where most pros seem to be split. Some use it on, some use it off. Sometimes it's good to know the exact range of your ability because if you end up missing your ability, you're gonna look really stupid on the main stage. If you guys played League of Legends before, you may have noticed already, when the game came out 10 years ago, a lot of pro players were using both normal and Smartcast. However, I will say that after the game matured for 10 years and players got a lot better and perfected their play, almost everyone uses Smartcast now in pro play. Maybe that's gonna happen in Omega Strikers as well, but since it's the start of the game, pro players are using both ability indicators on and off. Retrying ability if stunned is really useful if you're not mechanically gifted because you don't have to time using the ability after you get stunned, it'll just try to cast it right away. However, of course, if you're trying to go pro, you definitely want to switch this to off because it just offers you more control on your champion. And if skill is the main difference between you winning and the enemy winning, of course you want to have more control over your own game. I want to go over one more hotkey before we end this video, which is canceling abilities. If you have ability indicators turned on, you can cancel an ability by assigning a hotkey. So let's say you want to load up your special ability, but you are out of range, you could go ahead and press a cancel button in order to not waste the cooldown. I'm going to list this key binding as optional for now, because if you are not using ability indicators, it generally casts right away. Let me know what you guys think of the key bindings we're recommending in WASD with the ultimate on R and second ability on spacebar, and let me know if you think there will be a paradigm shift and we'll all be going back to MOBA in the future. Maybe there's even an alternate universe where everyone's using controllers because you have the most dynamic range on both shooting and moving. At the same time, there's a chance that all the Omega players who are using WASD right now are going to leave everyone in the dust, and we might have to wait for the new generation of players to really come out and dominate with MOBA controls. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and also what keys you guys like to use. That's going to be it from us today. If any of you guys are forward players and want to know 7 ways you're hurting your goalie, check out this video card right here.